All right, welcome everybody to Wellness Wednesday. I'm super excited to have you all here. My name is Dr. Brett Brimhall. This is a group of us that we come together every week with the goal of inspiring people to get well, be well, and to stay well. And we're part of a group of individuals that we're from all across the world, but we met with a common goal, which is to help ourselves and others really truly find solutions to health problems. And also part of a business. So our focus is at literally changing people's lives. And you never know who you're going to meet through that process. And so tonight, we have some very special guests that are giving up their time and their professional opinions to us. And I'm just super excited to introduce them. I met them through Carrie, who's also on the call. And their story is phenomenal, but not such a perfect time to have them share with us their expertise being Autism Awareness Month. And many of us, if not all of us, have people we know, love, and care about that are going through life with struggles that perhaps there could be some solutions to. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce you, Marco, and then Marco, I'll let you introduce your beautiful bride, because I know you can do an amazing job on that, and that way I don't get in trouble if I mess it up. You do. But Marco's been an occupational therapist for almost 30 years. He looks way too young for that. He's got tons of different awards. He sits on the board of the director of Autism Society. In 2013, established the Transformations Rehabilitation Services, which is an outpatient rehab clinic with children with neurological and atypical, like ADD, ADHD, autism. And really, he not only had the passion for helping other people's children, but his own child. And so I'm just beyond excited to have you and your wife, Diane, on here and to share with us what not only has changed your world, but also to give people some insights to things that could help their families that are struggling right now. So thank you for giving your time and attention. And we'll let you guys go 15 or so minutes, and then we'll ask a couple questions after we stop the recording. So please take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brett. I am so super pumped up, but at the same time, I'm so nervous because I've got like an hour's worth of information, and you said I've got like 15 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk really, really super fast. I'm glad you're recording this because there's just no way that you're going to be able to keep up with all the information that we have to share. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my slides. Let's see here, share screen. And that way, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? All right, can you see it okay? Yep, all right, awesome. All right, so let's go with, let's see here. Don't start my 15 minutes yet. I need every second I can get. All right, so here we go. All right, so you know what? Let me start with this. I speak I've spoken at the Autism Society conferences. I'm scheduled the next few weeks to start speaking again. Now that people are feeling a little bit more comfortable with doing in-person conferences, and I always get asked the question is how we got to this point. So I figured I'd go ahead and start there because people really like to know how did all this start. So like Brett, like you said, I've been a therapist for about 30 years and usually, before, I worked in corporate America for some of the largest hospitals here in the region. I'm also good with numbers, so I was an administrator for a number of years. And my wife, Diane, she's also an occupational therapist. She's been an OT for about 26, 27 years. She worked for the school district, one of the school districts here in town. And I always say it this way, Diane and I, we loved our jobs. We had no intentions whatsoever of really going into business for ourselves. But how many of you know that there's times when life will hand you unexpected surprises? And for us, that came in the form of my son, Patrick. His story is very interesting. When Patrick was very young, I noticed that he was having a lot of issues just coping. And the older he got, he started kind of getting more and more distant. Now, I was one of those typical dads where I thought he just needed tough love, really knew nothing about these kids. My experience as a therapist was more of an orthopedic therapist, knee replacements, hip replacements, laminectomy. So I knew nothing about kids with autism or ADHD or any of that stuff. So I was one of those typical knucklehead dads that thought he just needed tough love. Eventually, I came around and I agreed that he should get tested. And so when they ran multiple tests, I really couldn't tell you what kind of test they ran on him. They can never really quite figure out what was going on with him, things like ADD, ADHD, autism. So I did what any good parent would do. We started having him go to attending different therapists. So we explored all the different types of traditional therapies, OT, speech. I'm an OT, right? So we tried OT, speech, behavioral modification. And it seemed like we tried every medication under the sun. And it just seemed like every time we tried a different medication, Patrick got a different side effect. So we'd go back to the physician, and they would always say the same thing. Well, Mr. Rodriguez, let's try this medication and let's see how it works. Come back in 6 weeks. So we'd go back 6 weeks and say, well, now he's doing this, now he's doing that. Okay, Mr. Rodriguez, let's combine this medication with this medication and let's see how that works. So it was a lot of let's try, let's see, come back, and then we'll adjust if we need to. And I realized that the physicians really didn't know. Now, if you're a physician, this is really not, it's not their fault. They really didn't know. They were really trying to help my son, but they really just had no idea of what was actually going to help him. So I'm I know it's hard to believe, I'm an introverted personality type, but I'm also a type A, so I like to fix things. And so I started doing my own research. And what I found was very disturbing, but at the same time, it was the catalyst to get us to where we are today. So I'm going to share with you some of the things that I found, and hopefully it will help you to get started on your journey as well. So one of the things that I found was that children with autism, studies showed, if you look down here at the bottom left, they compiled 18 studies, and they showed that about 78% of children with autism have several biomarkers in common. Other studies show that up to 80% of children with autism have several biomarkers in common, including high levels of oxidative stress, low levels of glutathione, mitochondrial dysfunction, inflammation in the brain. Now, that's not just for autism, it's also true for ADHD. And if I had 2 or 3 hours, I could go into dyslexia, I could go into depression, anxiety, and so forth, but we're going to keep it nice and tight today. So oxidative stress is one of the main things that we find is very high levels with children with autism. In fact, the worst case that I ever saw was a child that was 4 years old, had his lipid peroxidase measured, and he had the oxidative stress levels of a 46-year-old man at 4 years old. And that's not good for a 46-year-old man, but certainly not good for a 4-year-old child. So now, I want you to look at this. If you go back to 1960, there's over 250,000 studies on oxidative stress. If you look at the last 20 years, there's 237,000 studies. That's over 95% of all the studies that have been done on oxidative stress have occurred over the last 20 years. Now, keep in mind that studies are not cheap. They cost millions of dollars. So what we're talking about is hundreds of millions of dollars to study oxidative stress. Now, ask yourself this question. If they're spending that much money to study oxidative stress, and oxidative stress is one of the key factors that affects persons with autism or any other neurologic atypicality, why don't most people know about it? That was very disturbing to me. So what else is affecting them? Or where does oxidative stress come from? Well, from the air we breathe, the food we eat, it comes from a lot of the electronics that we're exposed to, okay? And if you look at it, oxidative stress is not just related to autism or ADHD. We know now that oxidative stress has been linked to over 200 diseases like cancer, diabetes, Parkinson's, lupus, fibromyalgia, et cetera, et cetera. And yes, it is affecting persons with autism. Now, if you go to PubMed.gov, which is our National Library of Medicine, you'll see that there's over 629 studies here linking oxidative stress and autism, and then you'll find over 325 studies on mitochondria dysfunction and autism. Now, keep in mind that the National Library of Medicine, PubMed.gov, that's the gold standard for research. That's where your doctor goes, your health practitioner goes, nurse practitioner, your therapist. We don't do our research for medicine in Google. This is where we go. Now, that started to catch my attention. So in my studies, in my research over the years, I found that there are some common biomarkers that 78 to 80% of children with autism have in mind. One of them is brainwave dysregulation, low levels of an enzyme called glutathione, which leads to high levels of oxidative stress or free radicals, mitochondrial dysfunction, inflammation in the brain, and a poor gut biome. So I'm going to talk about a few of these. I won't be able to go into all of them. So this just kind of gives you an example of how things happen. So high levels of oxidative stress starts to affect the gut, which then leads to more oxidative stress, which leads to the destruction of mitochondria, which then leads to more oxidative stress, to inflammation in the brain. And it's just kind of a never-ending cycle. And none of the medications that are being given to these children are doing a single thing to stop this cycle. Now, please don't misunderstand. I am not anti-medication, but I asked my parents to become educated as to what these biomarkers are. And if you're going to medicate your child, please know what you're giving them, what the side effects are. Do your own research. You are your child's biggest advocate. The reason why Diane and I have this practice today is because we decided to become our child's biggest advocate. Our child did progress. He did do well. He graduated from high school. He played football. He overcame every single obstacle, and he progressed so well that it was his pediatrician and his neurologist that encouraged us to establish this practice. Now, you may not have those same that same opportunity. You may not be a therapist, but you can still be your child's biggest advocate. So let's go over some of these things with brainwave dysregulation. What exactly is brainwave dysregulation? Keep in mind that your brain is made up of 100 billion interconnected neurons, and your brain is constantly communicating with itself. And that communication happens chemically, but also electrically. Electrically, we can measure it with an EEG. So at our clinic, we do what's called brain mapping, which takes a three-dimensional image of the brain's electrical activity. And from that, we can see which brain waves, where, and how far from the standard deviation is that brain wave dysregulated. Now, the challenge with that is, and of course, we get these really nice, pretty reports. The challenge with that is that it's very limited. Not everybody has access to a brain map clinic. They're very rare. I think there's some in the Phoenix area, of course, here in El Paso. But it's a good tool to know. So we're talking about just general health and just kind of overall general health. So if you have access to a brain map study, I encourage you to do it. It'll really give you a lot of information. We have kids that are diagnosed with ADHD that after we do a brain map study, their neuroelectrical patterns are not consistent with ADHD. It's consistent with anxiety. But because they're small, the anxiety, you think about a kid with anxiety, a small child with anxiety. He can't tell you that he's anxious. He doesn't even know what that means. So what does he do? He fidgets. He can't pay attention. You go to the doctor says, oh, it must be ADHD. They give them Ritalin or some other ADHD medication, which is fine maybe for a person with ADHD. But when you're talking about a person with anxiety, now you're kicking in the high beta waves and you're making the anxiety even worse. I hope that makes sense. So that's brainwave dysregulation. What about this? We talked about oxidative stress, low levels of glutathione. Let's talk about that for a minute. So what is glutathione? Well, keep in mind that glutathione is the most abundant single molecule in your body that nobody's ever heard of, okay? It's an enzyme. And what it does is it is a master detoxifier. As I mentioned before, we're exposed to a lot of environmental toxins, the food you eat, the air you breathe, all the preservatives. You know, most of the kids that have autism, they're not going to eat healthy. They like chicken nuggets. They like, those kinds of foods. So all of that is leading to more oxidative stress. Well, these children have very low levels of glutathione. So when they have low levels of glutathione, they're not able to detoxify their body. So I'm going to share with you a short video that just explains what happens inside the cells.
Those chemicals, you may know them as free radicals, react with all the components of our cells, literally bombarding them millions of times per second, damaging all our cells. And the result? Oxidative stress. And we all have it. The body fights back with a system of defenses. It makes two antioxidant enzymes whose job is to gobble up the free radicals before they can harm our cells.
All right, so your body needs to produce glutathione, okay? So if these children with autism have very low levels of glutathione, what are your options? How do you boost glutathione in your body so that they can produce glutathione and they can detoxify their body so you don't have a child like the one child that had oxidative stress levels of a 46-year-old man? Well, diet and exercise are always a good start, okay? And here's some foods that can help to boost glutathione. Here's the problem that I found, though, as a therapist working now for many years with hundreds of kids with autism. good luck trying to get the kids to eat these types of foods. It's just not within, you get those picky eaters, right? Good luck trying to get your kid to eat asparagus or an avocado or cabbage. So if diet and exercise are not possible, then are there natural supplements out there that can help to boost glutathione? So I'm a big proponent of natural compounds, of supplements, and supplementing your diet, right? And there's a lot of people that I understand out there that are not, and they think that they're all, voodoo or some kind of snake oil. Well, I'm going to give you a different perspective. I want you to look at DMAE, dimethylamino ethanol. That's a very natural compound that anybody could buy at a GNC. I want you to notice that at the time I did this was about 2 or 3 years ago, there was already 478 studies on DMAE. 110 of those studies had been done on its effects on persons with autism, multiple studies on ADHD as well as Alzheimer's. They're not studying this for nothing, because they've got nothing better to do. They're studying it because there's something big going on here. L-theanine is another natural compound. Look what it does. It enhances alpha brainwaves, which is very important for persons with autism. Helping to produce GABA, which is really important for persons who are having seizures. Persons who have seizures tend to have very low levels of GABA. Well, L-theanine helps to boost the neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine levels, etc. Another one is turmeric. Turmeric is great. It blocks the NF-κB molecule, which is what leads to the inflammatory process. But look at this. Turmeric will boost your brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Now, what in the world is that? That is a chemical that is released in your brain, and when it does, it puts your brain cells into a state of axonal genesis, which is the creation of new axons or new connections. Well, when you can do that, then your brain is it's got a more robust series or a network of communication, right? Of highways. It can also in some cases, it can put your brain into a state of neurogenesis, which is a creation of newer and healthier brain cells. Now, who in the world doesn't want that? Here's another one. There was a study that was done. It was a small study, but I thought it was significant. They took 60 people in a randomized study. 30 of them took Prozac, 30 of them took 1 gram of curcumin, and one of them took both the Prozac and the curcumin. After 6 weeks, they found that the people who took the Prozac and the people who took the curcumin had very similar results. Now, how often do you think a doctor is going to say, hey, you know what, don't take Prozac, take curcumin instead? They're not going to do that. And if you don't know what curcumin is, like turmeric, it's a spice that's used in a lot of cooking from India. And what's interesting is that the group that took the Prozac and the curcumin had the best results. All right. So what if you can't do all of this, right? Is there a company or is there a product out there that has taken all of this that can help to reduce that oxidative stress levels and boost glutathione? And yes, there is. Now, I'm encouraging you to do your own research. I'm going to talk about a particular product here that I have found does certain things. Now, in no way, please understand this, in no way am I saying that any of these products are meant to treat, cure, or mitigate disease. We're talking about just specific systems in your body and some things that can help. And again, we're talking about oxidative stress. So Protandim, which is made by a company called LifeVantage, has been clinically proven to reduce oxidative stress by 40% in 30 days and up to 70% in 4 months. And look at one of the things that it does here. We talked about glutathione. It can boost glutathione by up to 300%. Not just glutathione, but over 300 different enzymes. All right. So we'll talk about that. Let's move on to mitochondrial dysfunction. What in the world is mitochondria? Well, if you go back to junior high school biology, you'll remember that mitochondria exists in every single one of your cells. They call it the powerhouse of the cell, but it does more than that. There are over 10 million billion mitochondria in your entire body. 10% of your body weight has to do with mitochondria. And persons with autism, 78 to 80% of them have dysfunctional or inefficient mitochondria. So again, if diet and exercise are not necessarily an option because you've got one of those picky eaters, what can you do? Well, LiveVantage has a product called it's an NRF1 activator. And all it does is it's clinically proven to boost the production of mitochondria. Again, it's not intended to treat or cure anything, any of that stuff. All it will do is it helps to boost the mitochondria. Will a child benefit from that? I don't know. My experience has been that they do benefit from that. And I'll show you some of the proof here in just a minute. Okay, inflammation in the brain, and of course, we could talk about poor gut biome. Now, again, for the sake of time, I won't necessarily go into all of that, but I want you to keep in mind the company these are a lot of the products that we recommend. I encourage you to do your research. If you're not satisfied with what my report or what I have to, go out and do your own research. That's what I ask parents to do, is to become your child's biggest advocate. Don't just sit back and let people tell you what you can and what you cannot do. The reason why I really like the LiveVantage products is because there's the research. I always like to say that you can't argue with two R's: research and results. And I've showed the results here in just a minute, but one of the things that I like is that this product has been studied by lots of different major universities. LSU, in conjunction with the Skin Cancer Foundation, they studied this. Ohio State, in conjunction with the American Heart Association, they studied this. Johns Hopkins studied this against lung cancer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The National Institute of Health, they studied this. So there's a lot of research behind it. Again, I just encourage you to go out and do your own research. It's been featured on everything from ABC Primetime. It was featured on Dr. Phil, Donnie Osmond. Those of you who are my age know remember the Donnie and Marie show. Manny Pacquiao, the company or the soccer team from Real Salt Lake has been. They promote this product on their jerseys. In fact, Major League Soccer. Et cetera, et cetera. Okay, I encourage you. In fact, look at this. Washington State University said that our ability to activate that NRF2 pathway, which is one of the things that Protandim NRF2 does, our ability to activate NRF2 may well become the most extraordinary therapeutic and most extraordinary preventative breakthrough in the history of health. Now, guys, if they're saying that, there's got to be something to it. So I encourage you, just get back with the person who invited you and just see how this could, possibly help you. Okay. Now, that's a little bit of the research. What about the results? Now, at our clinic, as I mentioned, we do a lot of brain map studies, and I'm going to show you some of the results of the kids that we have that are getting not only the therapy services, but are following the protocols as we have not necessarily prescribed, but as we recommend. So this was a child, and if you look right here, he's got you see the Z-score where it says 12.7 right here? Hopefully you can see that. That's how many standard deviations he is from zero. Zero is what you would consider the norm. To keep that in perspective, anything beyond 2.5 or 3, that's really problematic. Either 2.5 to 3 negative, or 2.5, 3 in the positive. This person has a very chaotic, very noisy brain at 12.7. This mom agreed to follow the protocols and take our recommendations. And look at what happened after 10 months. This child's brainwave activity standard deviation was reduced to 4.5. Another study. This was a different child who had a theta wave standard deviation of 10.3. After 10 months, was reduced to 4.9. Still a little bit high. It's still not. I would like to see it somewhere around -2 or +2, or maybe closer to 0. But still a significant difference after only about 10 months. Now look at this child, -14.9. I mean, it's almost like this child's brain had been shut down. This child was virtually nonverbal. He was having a really difficult time interacting, functioning. He required lots of therapy services. After 10 months, you notice here, he was already 14.5 years old. After 10 months, look at the difference in his score, in his standard deviation, 2.3. Do you realize this child no longer requires occupational therapy in the school district? He's now taking martial arts. He's having, normal interactions and conversations with people. The anxiety levels are gone. This child is a completely different child. When I talk to the mom, she starts crying. She starts making me cry just because I've seen this kid and how he's really just come out of his shell. Again, we're not talking about a cure. He still has autism, and nobody's making any claims about that. What we're talking about here is you can't argue with the score of negative 14.9 all the way to 2.3. Look at this is another child, a standard deviation in the theta scores of negative 12.9 after it's about, I think, 10 or 11 months, up to 2.7, okay? Now, this is my own personal story. This is my son, Seth. Seth, when he was born with no issues, I have 6 children. You heard about Patrick, who was born, and he was the reason why we started this journey. He's my 3rd son. Now, this is Seth, and he's my youngest son. He wasn't born with any neurologic atypicality whatsoever. But at 7 years old, he had a really bad accident at a summer camp, and he sustained an injury to his brain. And so we did therapy with him, and he did survive, thank God, but he struggled in school. He was in special education, and he was that way for 8 years. When I first heard about these formulas and these protocols, I thought, well, if this can do what they say it can do, maybe it would help my son, Seth. So he and I agreed to start what I call biohacking, or flipping the switch together. These are his results. He was making, again, he was surviving. He was doing fairly well. After 16 weeks, I want you to keep in mind, this child had been in special education for 8 years. And after 6 weeks, he took what's called the STAR test. It's a standardized test here in Texas. The second person to finish in his class. He tested so well, his scores were so well, they retested him again for special education because they thought that maybe there had been some kind of a misunderstanding or something had happened with his scores. He tested out of special education. He's now a senior about to graduate. 4 out of his 8 classes are advanced placement, getting university credit with the University of Texas at Austin. When I talked to him and I asked him, Seth, what was it what do you feel different? And he says, I don't know, Dad. It just kind of seems like my brain is alive. And how do you not go and share that with other people? Right? I mean, I see this every single day. I'm so sorry. Wow. I see this every single day with my patients. And that's one thing, because, as a clinician, yes, I do care about all my kids. All my patients are like they're my own kid, but it is different when it's your own blood. And when my own son is now getting ready to graduate, he's getting ready to go to college. He just got his, I believe it's his, what was it, Diane? His orange belt in jiu-jitsu, and also he got a belt in, freeform combat. Freeform combat. This kid's life is completely different. So, I don't know, Brett, how, I hope I didn't, cross any boundaries or anything, but, I really don't care. Take the information that we have, and what do you have to lose? So with that, Brett, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Hey, Marco, thank you so much. And I love the realness in that. And, what you said was absolutely amazing. And I just love the fact that you share and you're real, because at the end of the day, like, you wanted to help your own child, and to have something like this change his life, again, how can you be quiet about that? So appreciate you sharing this, and actually excited to be able to share this with other people that couldn't hop on.
Thanks for watching. And remember, one change can have an enormous effect. Remember to subscribe, hit the bell and the like, and we'll see you next time on Love to Live.